Num num num. Let's go. Oh, there we go. Okay. My microphone went out for a tad bit there. But give me just like 2 seconds to get the chat up as well as the post for today's stream. Should be a pretty fun one, I'm thinking. My encoding's getting overloaded here. My camera's messing up. Yep. We gotta give people a chance to get in here anyway. I don't have a dedicated stream time, so something I should probably focus on for the future. Wait, I don't want to do that yet. I'm gonna post this, comment that, heart and like it, close this, switch this back to my main account. And then close the game. Double check this to make sure nobody's doing anything weird. Nope, looks pretty good. Open up the game and get the audio going. So, this is Half-Life 2, but I'm going to go through the development or commentary because it's new. The first game to have developer commentary was actually not a game. It was Half-Life 2 Lost Coast, which was kind of a tech demo that they released a little bit after Half-Life 2 and before Half-Life episode 1, I think. I don't remember the exact timing, but that was the first one that had it, and all of the other games after that have had it, I believe. So Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and 2 had it in their base release, and Portal 1 and 2 had it in their base release, as well as some of the other games that they came out with. But Half-Life 2 never had it, even though the whatchamacallit is the same, the engine, so they could probably pretty easily put it in, which is what they've done for the 20th anniversary edition or update. It's not really an edition. Okay, so we're still going to play the game. The commentary nodes still have you play through the game, basically, but they have these nodes scattered around the game that let you hear the dev commentary. So we're going to look through the first couple of them.
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine. Not that I wish to imply you have been sleeping on the job. No one is more deserving of a rest.
Additionally, it would be surprising if they added these for Half-Life 1 or any of the ones I've played before this. Oh, I need, I can't believe that is not on. Subtitles. Normal, whatever. Yep. With enhanced aim assist. I'm gonna turn aim assist off, actually. Because why would I need that? Okay, everything else looks fine.
The right man in the wrong
There we go.
place can make all the difference in the world. So wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes.
The writing in this game is surprisingly good considering it doesn't actually need to be. Okay, we don't have any commentary nodes on the train here. which is kind of surprising, actually. But obviously this is similar to the start of Half-Life 1. Oh, here we go. Here's some of the commentary notes. They're gonna come in this. Yeah.
I'm Gabe Newell, and welcome back to Half-Life 2.
Here we go.
It's been a long 20 years since its release. In this anniversary update, we've tried to respond to as many of the community's requests as possible. And while this might not be the absolute #1 request from fans, I often hear how much people would like a commentary mode, so we're excited to finally make that happen. Not only was it a challenge to remember many of the details of Half-Life 2's development, but it's not easy to crack open decades-old computer code and wonder what the hell you were thinking way back then. Along with the dev commentary, we've cleaned up a bunch of old bugs and tried to leave things in a better shape than we found them. And at least this time, we have the luxury of knowing how things turned out in the end. To listen to a commentary note, put your crosshair over the floating commentary symbol and press your use key. To stop a commentary node, put your crosshair over the rotating node and press the use key again. And please, let me know what you think. You can reach me at GabeM@ValveSoftware.com. Thanks, and have fun.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's supposed to do that. Okay, I'm also going to adjust the audio settings. Oh, you can't adjust them individually. Okay, I'm just going to turn the audio up in general then to here. So it'll be a little bit louder on the actual game audio. But when we listen to a commentary node, you can hear it.
It might be hard to remember it now, but back when Half-Life 2 came out, small objects in games, like these bits of trash, were usually static. As in, they didn't really move, or if they did, it was in a very simple way. If you were lucky, they might break apart into some sprites if you hit them. One of the goals for this initial train station section was to really make it clear to players that these kinds of things were properly, physically, actually being simulated in Half-Life 2. They could be picked up, dropped, thrown, broken, moved by other forces, you name it. Here we're starting with just a small thing, showing that trash is being blown by the arrival of the train, or, more specifically, an invisible volume that's triggered by the player leaving the train.
Yeah. And you can do that with a bunch of objects. The sort of like limited physics in this game, right, in terms of, it's not actually that limited. It's a full physics engine with objects in it. But like, kind of conceptually designing a game with that in mind, right, going, okay, we can make a bunch of objects that work in the game setting because they're objects we need, or we can make a system for dealing with any object and then put it in.
Welcome to City 17.
Thanks.
Train station. The beginning of a Half-Life game has a big job to do. We have to introduce players to a new world while teaching them how to interact with it. Players need to quickly grasp what's happening, who the key players are, what threats they face, and how they fit into it all. Above all else, it has to be as fun and interactive as possible. Nailing this takes a lot of iteration and playtesting, especially on the small moments that make up a bigger picture of the game. In this section, we'll highlight some key moments, game design problems, and a few playtests where things didn't quite go as planned.
Now, I haven't heard any of these commentary notes before because they're new, and I didn't go through the whole game before the stream. But this section is a very good open version of the section from Half-Life 1, right? The coming in on the train section, in my opinion, where you're kind of dropped, you feel like you're actually in the world here. But in this one, it's a lot more effective because you can pick things up, you can throw them.
Welcome to City 17.
Grab them, you can run around.
You have chosen or been chosen to relocate to one of our finest remaining urban centers.
It's all I have left.
Metro Cop shoving citizens. We've only walked a few feet and we're already got problems to solve. We're introducing the Metro Cop, an enemy that eventually we're going to ask players to kill, and giving you a glimpse of the world they're stepping into. It's a simple, clear moment that shows the relationships between the Metro Cops and citizens, and by extension, the player. At the same time, we decided to reinforce the existence of the core physics simulation, showing the way in which NPCs can casually interact with objects in the world. Seeing something like a suitcase knock into another and dislodge was pretty novel back then. These moments at the train station, where we combined multiple goals, were the most successful. They felt natural, like the game wasn't pausing just to teach you a lesson.
That's true, and actually, that's something that I think some modern sort of AAA high-budget games have a problem
Were
with,
you the only ones on that train?
where they get really
Welcome.
worried that the player
Welcome
isn't
to
going to
City
understand what they're trying to
17.
say.
You have
Right.
chosen,
And if you think about it
been
here,
chosen to relocate to one of our finest remaining urban centers.
oh, we can
I
go
thought
over
so
here.
much of City 17 that I elected
Overwatch
to
stopped our train in the
establish
woods and
my
took my husband for
administration here.
questioning.
in the
They said he'd
citadel
be
so
on the next
thoughtfully
train.
provided by
I'm
our
not
benefactor.
sure when that was.
I've
But
been
they're
proud to
being
call
nice,
City
though,
17
letting me wait
my
for
home.
him.
Citizens. When it came time to design the human citizens of City 17 and the world outside the city, we chose to include a variety of races, ages, and genders. This not only provided narrative context for the Combine's enslavement of all of humanity, but it was also important to us that anyone playing the game could see themselves represented in the Resistance, with everyone on Earth united against the Combine. While we found a number of candidates to use as reference in creating these citizens through our daily lives and connections, we ultimately resorted to advertising in the Seattle Times classifieds to reach the desired range of faces that we'd envisioned.
Interesting.
Welcome to City
It's
17.
certainly telling of how things have moved.
Been
Oh,
chosen to
we
relocate
broke
to
something.
one of our finest remaining urban centers.
Yep, we broke a glass thing. Very cool.
17 that I elected
There's
to
some other
establish
commentary notes back
my
here. that-
administration here in the citadel so
Sweeping Vortigaunt. Another key moment of storytelling and another nod to the physics system. Here, we're showing how Vortigaunts fit into this new world, which is a big shift from their Half-Life 1 role as enemies. Like so many moments in Train Station, the Sweeping Vortigaunt came from our constant hunt for ways to show characters interacting naturally with the physics system. Why just tell players Vortigaunts are friendly now, when you can show one casually sweeping the floor and knocking around some simulated objects? Nothing signals, hey, don't shoot me this time around, like someone willing to tidy up.
Yeah, there's a lot of I mean, you talk about like Bethesda games and stuff like that with the
Welcome
environmental
to
storytelling,
City
but
17. You have
I think
chosen
really, Half-Life 2 has really done it the best,
remaining urban centers. I thought
right?
so
And
much
we
of
also
City
get the
17 that I elected to
the
establish my
whatchamacallit back.
in the citadel so thoughtfully
Now, of course, this physics system is not
I've been proud to call
like
City
some sort of
17
weird
my
perfect
home.
physics system,
And so,
as you
whether
can
are here to
see.
stay or passing through
but
on your way to Arts on
it is effective
Welcome.
at presenting things for the
It's safe.
ones who are looking to play the game, right? If you're not looking to play the game, you're instead just gonna look to like grab this box and screw with it as much as possible, like those people in Gmod. It's still fun to play, like it's still fun to do that, but that's a different kind of thing. Oh, also we get the phone.
Natural storytelling. To achieve our world building and storytelling goals throughout the train station, we needed a natural way to deliver dialogue without it feeling too gamey or requiring tutorials. We noticed players often approached NPCs to get a closer look, so we turned that into an opportunity for the NPCs to acknowledge the player and deliver their lines. This kept interactions low-key, which was essential since the citizens aren't exactly too cheerful or lively. The simplicity of this approach also aligned with one of Half-Life's core storytelling goals, making the narrative responsive to the player's interest. Some players want to dig into every detail, while others just want to know what to do next. Giving players control over how much story they want to engage with, without it blocking progress, is a goal we always try to maintain in a Half-Life game. Plus, the less complicated a feature is to implement, the more of it we can include.
Yeah, they kind of just lifted the whole walk up to someone and press
Don't
A
drink the
thing.
water. They put something in it to make you forget. I don't even remember how I got here.
The other problem is because this game is so highly played, some of these interactions are now just funny. They're not like, if you think about it,
They're always departing, but they never arrive.
This is a very scary world that we're entering into. But, this guy saying he doesn't even remember how he got here is more amusing, you know,
Dr. Breen again?
in the context of like, oh, I'm playing a game.
I didn't say that too loud. This is his base of operations.
But like, right? That's a big like story thing that they're just kind of expecting you to maybe miss. But also the other thing here is the NPCs react to you. That guy just stopped looking at me because and he starts looking at you when you move close to him. Same thing with all the NPCs. It's very
I see they took your suitcase too.
impressive for 20 years ago. Like, this game, if it came out this year, I think would still be one of the best games released this year.
Relocate to one of our finest remaining urban centers.
I think we'll get to that eventually.
City 17 that I elected to establish.
Early tech planning. Shipping a game always teaches us a lot. We finally get to find out which choices we made were good ones, and which were ones we should do differently next time. So after Half-Life 1, when we sat down to start thinking about what kind of sequel we could build, we had all kinds of player feedback to digest. From it, we tried to build a master list of things that Half-Life 2 was going to focus on. We didn't try to design a specific player experience. Instead, we found it more useful to approach the question from a technological standpoint. Black Mesa's security guards and scientists had worked well. What could we do if we pushed it really, really hard on characters? We liked our interactive storytelling. What could we build that would allow us to do even more of it, and a greater variety? The exploration and interaction with the Black Mesa was compelling to players. Maybe a physics system would allow us to take that further. In all these areas, we tried to imagine the best version of it could look like years in the future, and back solve from that a set of technological steps that might get us there.
Yeah, that shows that they basically said what's the best version of this and how can we make it better. Because if you think about all the gameplay and all of the engines and game stuff in this game, it is all equivalent to what modern games have, right? There hasn't really been much improvement in terms of environment or storytelling. Yeah, here we go.
Creating a sense of immersion was a core principle in our approach to Half-Life 1's storytelling, and it led us to the self-imposed constraints of never, or at least very rarely, taking control away from the player and of keeping the player's avatar silent. These limitations made storytelling more challenging at times, but we felt it was important to stay with them for Half-Life 2. Our hope was that by maintaining these principles, we'd push ourselves to explore deeper, more interactive storytelling.
I thought so much of City 17.
One of the other things here, which they're kind of getting at but haven't gotten to it yet, stating it specifically, even though this area is kind of a tutorial area.
And so, whether you are here to stay or passing through on your way to Barcelona, welcome to City 17. It's safe.
This is a tutorial area, and yet it's interesting. A lot of tutorial areas in games nowadays are
This must be a mistake. I got a
boring.
standard relocation coupon just like everybody else.
We also get
characters. In Half-Life 1, security guards and scientists could best be described as archetypes, not individuals. They were abstractions of characters that matched the visual fidelity we could achieve at the time. But as our technology improved with Half-Life 2, we saw an opportunity to move beyond abstractions. The increased visual fidelity of the character models, combined with improvements in animation, made us believe we could focus on creating individual characters, people you would actually care about. We allowed ourselves to write real dialogue and have characters deliver it in a way that felt realistic enough for players to not think about them as pawns in a video game, and hopefully propel our narrative forward. In 2001, a couple of years into development, we were energized by Japan Studios' Ika. Directed by an animator, it blew us away with its reliance on characters
I've
as
never
the
heard
key
of that one.
connection with the player, giving us the courage to keep pushing forward.
Oh yeah. A very scary moment.
I'm gonna need me some privacy for this.
This is a very good
that
moment.
beer I owed you.
Even though
It's me, Gordon. Barney from Black Mesa.
Like-
Sorry for the scare. I had to put on a show for the cameras. I've been working.
there's a
undercover
lot of
with
characters they
civil
introduce
protection.
here, which are
It
like
can't take too
introduced
long or they'll get
before this
suspicious.
game,
I'm
and
way
they
behind on
they
my
don't do
eating quota.
a great job of like
Barney, what is it?
explaining that these guys are in the first game.
Sorry,
You just
Doc,
didn't
but
realize it.
Look who's here.
Great Scott! Gordon Freeman! I expected more warning.
Yeah, you and me both, Doc. He was about to board the express to Nova Prospect.
Well, Barney, what do you
Like
intend?
both of
I'm thinking.
these characters are in Half-Life 1. I mean, Barney's in Blue Shift, so he's like a main character. But
As long as he
all
stays
of the
away from
scientists you
checkpoints,
meet
we
here,
should be okay.
including Dr.
Listen,
Breen,
I gotta go, Doc. We're
are
taking
like
enough chances as it is.
in
Very well.
Half-Life
And,
1 and
Gordon,
associated
good to
expansions,
see you.
but it's hard
Okay,
to
Gordon,
tell
you're gonna
because
have
there's
to
no
make your own way
subtitles.
to Dr. Kleiner's
It's
lab.
really that's one of the big
Man,
ones.
that's what I was afraid of. Get in here, Gordon, before you blow my cover.
Okay.
Blocking tutorials. At times, we need to be certain the player has learned something.
He's telling us
And the
stuff
standard
about
method, at least in
picking
game development, not in life, is to trap them behind a gate of some kind, where the player must demonstrate their
Not in
knowledge to
life.
be able to continue. We try to disguise these gates as something natural, so it doesn't feel like the game has come to a halt. Of course, time, resources, or the environmental context itself can make that tricky. In this case, we needed to teach the players how to move objects, so a simple stacking puzzle seemed like the best solution. We tested more complex designs, but they ended up being less effective at teaching the actual thing we needed the player to learn.
Blocking tutorials 2. There are two failures of note in this tutorial. First, players can break it by tossing all the boxes out the window, which is obviously not great. This leaves them stuck and unable to continue, which we consider a game-stopping bug that must be fixed. A clean solution would have been to tweak the window or crate sizes so that the player could fit through but not the crates. The problem was that we really only caught this problem late in development. Making even a simple change like that can have unpredictable game-breaking consequences, and right before launch no less. Also, this issue was purely theoretical. We'd never actually seen players do it. Our playtests of the design space had gone smoothly, with players learning what they needed and moving on. So changing the room's design this late in the game could have disrupted that success in ways that we couldn't foresee, so we opted for a more conservative fix rather than something elegant. If you're curious, try tossing all the boxes out the window and see what happens.
Okay, one of the things I want to note here is that the ladder physics are still janky. It's one of the things they didn't really fix, and it's kind of... It's still... So they did help with the ability to latch on to ladders with the E button, which is great, as well as the ability to unlatch from them. But they're still using this kind of latching thing, which most people eventually get rid of in favor of kind of like a system that you get close enough to this area, it moves you up. You know, like Minecraft, where there's kind of a field where if you're close enough to the ladder, you can move up on it.
Blocking tutorials 3. The second failure in this tutorial space is a case of misteaching, where we accidentally teach the players something we didn't intend. This can be hard to avoid without extensive playtesting, since the game is always teaching, even when it's not by design. We cover a more extreme example of this later in Train Station. Some cases of misteaching are critical to fix, like if the player learns the wrong way to use a weapon or interact with a common element of the game. But this one was more subtle. While teaching players to move objects, we also taught them to stack physics objects to escape a space. Normally that's fine, except we don't deploy that puzzle later in the game, and teaching something irrelevant just clutters up their mental toolkit and makes it harder to readily keep useful things in mind later on. Worse, stacking objects to escape the play space become a problem later on, something we had to actively prevent in multiple areas. With so many physics-based objects in the game, blocking this behavior without putting ceilings everywhere wasn't really an option. In the end, we hoped players wouldn't overthink this early lesson, and when playtests showed players getting stuck later on, we made sure not to remind them of it.
Yeah, that is kind of a problem. Although there is a very interesting conundrum, or a video that I saw a while ago. I'm going to throw all the boxes down. I think I know what this does, but I'm going to throw them all down just to show you. So the, what was I going to say? Yeah, in Half-Life 1, there was a video I saw a while ago that basically asked the question, how far can you go backwards? If you get to the end of the game, how far can you go back to the beginning of the game? Using physics objects as well as breaking things and all that stuff. So here, that's the last box, and we see it kind of spawns behind the commentary node. But if we, yeah, as soon as we let go of the box, it spawns another one, which is pretty much fine, right? Like, if you're specifically going out of your way to try something that the game doesn't expect, you're not really losing your immersion, right? You're already not playing in a way that's immersive, so you don't really care if you screw it up. However, it does mean that you can get back if you want, kind of, because now you have enough boxes over here to get back if you want. There's a commentary node here. Here it is.
Fall damage. Teaching players how to do things is an essential thing for the game to do, but for them to make confident decisions, they also need to understand the more subtle rules. This small moment covers two of those. First, it shows how far the player can fall without taking damage. Second, it introduces a bit of the game's vocabulary, how the game will communicate with them. Players often worry about taking fall damage, but they also worry about taking a step that they can't take back. So here, a welcoming crate to land on signals that dropping down is safe and it's the way forward. And when the crate breaks, it reinforces the physics simulation. And is likely the first time players will see that larger objects can be broken apart.
Let's see if we can recreate the effect here. Oh, whoops. No, doesn't look like it. Well, it'll happen again. That will. Oop, here we go. First loading kind of thing. This game also operates on the like slowly loading parts as you go through. So. Oh, here we go.
Pick up that can. Contextualizing tutorials, creating a story scenario in which they happen, lets us do more than just stop the game to teach players something. We get to add narrative value to the moment. Here, teaching the player how to throw objects is combined with a narrative setup that gives them a choice in how to respond. After watching the Metro cops casually abuse citizens, it felt right to put the player in a similar position next. If they had opinions on how the citizens should have reacted, now they get to express them. Playtesting showed most players either complied or refused the request to pick up the can, but some tried to avoid the confrontation entirely. Others would comply initially, then retaliate after feeling humiliated. By keeping the moment relatively constrained, in both terms of player actions and the space itself, we could generally react appropriately to whatever choice they made.
And then it gives you the thing to throw it, and he'll smack you. Yeah.
This simple fact has far-reaching implications.
Yeah, but you have to put it in the trash can to move along. Oh, but if you get too close to him, he'll still hit you.
Playtesting. Playtesting is a core part of how we make games. We can never fully predict how players will respond or what they'll take away from what we built. So we test to learn and hopefully improve. During a playtest, we don't guide or talk to the player, even if they're stuck, as it's extremely unlikely that we'll be sitting there next to the player once the game ships.
Extremely unlikely.
Our goal is for testers to forget that they're playtesting altogether and play as if they're at home. Any interruptions risk skewing the data, so we only step in if there's a bug that's blocking progress, or more rarely, if their behavior is so confusing that we need to understand what they're thinking.
And today,
You'll have to wait your turn like everybody else.
And like a cornered beast, it will not go down.
Now, this whole train station is pretty linear. Oop. Anyway.
Early in a Half-Life game, one of our goals is to make promises to the player, giving them a sense of what to expect later on. From movies to TV shows and books, all great entertainment does this in some way, and video games are no different. The promises in a Half-Life game can take different forms. Some are simple, like offering just a glimpse of something intriguing. Others are more layered, like the interactions with Metro Cops. By putting the player in a powerless position against them, we set the stage for that future moment when they can finally get to retaliate.
Yeah, we don't get any. Whatever, I think it's food they're getting. But we also get
the Citadel. We wanted the player's first view of City 17 to highlight the Citadel and its dominance over the city, representing the Combine's complete and total power over humanity. It also needed to serve as a clear goal. Even at the start, you can see where your journey ends. But despite its massive size, playtesters often missed it. A player's sense of depth and scale
so they
can
had
be
to put
tricky
it
on a
right
computer
when you
monitor.
walk out. You know.
If you've played any games in VR, you'll likely have noticed that scale feels more natural. Anyway, in this case, the Citadel's position above the player didn't help things either, which may be because FPS games train players to focus straight ahead or down at their feet. To improve the chances of players taking in the Citadel, we added birds flying towards the structure. A subtle trick we found
I
helps
didn't
guide
notice
the
that.
player's view.
We also have that, yeah, which is supposed to happen. I don't know. They're probably going to talk about that eventually. Here, let's go.
Exploration. After being herded through the train station by Metro Cops, we wanted to give the player a chance to explore. This plaza offered several ways to interact with citizens, Metro Cops, scanners, and the city infrastructure. We aimed for these interactions to continue building the world without needing explicit tutorials, and we refined them until they work naturally, without any real training.
Yeah, and this area is very good at like explaining some of the world and feeling explorable while also not like open.
Ropes. One of the things we noticed in all of the reference images that we gathered for City 17
Oh, there we go, yeah.
was that there were cables and wires everywhere, and that they were a large part of the high-frequency detail in view. We loved the look of these older European cities enmeshed in the haphazard web of modern life. We felt like we needed a solution for cables, ropes, and similar elements, and we wanted them to be dynamic. Our level designers were eager to create plug puzzles, and connecting a cord to each plug helped players better understand the mechanics. Early in production, we built a rope system and iterated on it throughout development.
Yeah, ropes.
Under the hood, each rope is made of multiple segments stretched between the two endpoints, and they can move independently. Each segment acts like a spring and responds to
there we
forces
go,
in
yeah.
the game, such as a gentle wind or the passing of a Combine gunship overhead. When rendered, each segment is shown facing the camera and is bump mapped, which is crucial for giving the ropes a realistic, rounded appearance.
Playtesting Anecdote 1. One memorable playtest reminded us that we can never be certain what players are thinking or what lessons they've taken from their experience. This tester, after playing from the start and stuck trying to open a door, spent several minutes going back and forth between the game and the keyboard settings. When we asked what they were looking for, they said they were searching for the inventory controls, thinking they could use an item they'd picked up earlier to unlock the door. While we'd seen them collect and drop several physics objects, they'd misunderstood what was happening. The tester believed that pressing the use key while holding an object moved it into an inventory because the item dropped straight down. We knew it was just gravity, but their assumption wasn't crazy. Some adventure games of that era did slide items into an invisible inventory that way. We explained there was no inventory, and the playtest continued. Later, we considered whether we needed to address this, but since no other playtesters had the same confusion, and all of our potential solutions were more heavy-handed than necessary, we decided it was an outlier that was okay to remain unaddressed. It served as a good reminder, though, of how even the most subtle, overlooked details can mislead a player.
if you've ever seen certain streamers play games, most prominently, probably somebody like Germa, yeah, sometimes you're just not going to get it.
They have thrown a switch and exorcised our demons in a single stroke.
Anyway, we can see that they've taken time to put little guys over all these doors. It's a great upgrade, much preferable than Portal 2, where they just make the doors inaccessible, like they just don't work. In this one, right, when everything's locked down, it feels like it's locked down. Like it's not just, oh, I can't go anywhere because I don't want them. They don't want me to go anywhere. Right. Yeah, you can't actually go.
Strider. This simple moment is a promise that you'll encounter this enormous thing later in the game.
It's also World
Even
of
an
Worlds.
uncomplicated scene such as this really does require a lot of playtesting and iteration because of Half-Life's goal of not taking control away from the player. As you can imagine, it takes a lot of small tweaks to ensure that as many players as possible are looking at the right place at the right time here. The street layout and the Metrocop scene are all set to guide the player's gaze, perfectly framing the Strider when it appears.
I mean, it's like, this frame is very artistic. Oh. Okay.
Early game exploration. Up until this plaza, the player likely hasn't had to think much about their path, as it's been clear and straightforward. But here, we wanted to encourage exploration, which meant making the way forward less obvious, which can produce a feeling of being lost or, worse, confused, as you might expect. These kinds of shifts can be tough, especially early in the game, when the player is still learning the game's guidance cues. Here, it's further complicated by force-fielded checkpoints, which allow NPC citizens to move through,
Yeah,
but
that
restrict
is
the player,
kind of a concern.
leading many playtesters to believe that there was a way to bypass them. Ultimately, it was extensive testing that helped us find the right visibility for the alley forward, using lighting, layout, and a wooden crate, an object players have already used as a sign they're headed in the right direction, all to subtly guide them forward.
Yeah, so here's what I think. The little things on the doors that look like locks are very good at presenting that these are places that you're probably never going to be able to open. Or at least definitely not right now, right? In contrast, the little fields that the NPCs walk through that you can't do kind of present a very much more like tangible, possibly way to get through kind of thing, which is not as great as the little locks on all the doors, right? You can't open the door, there's a lock on it. It's also got a camera on it, and it's very, totalitarian, but that's not really the point. The point is that you can't get through because there's a lock on the door. Maybe you'll be able to break it later, but you obviously can't do that now. So, thus... Oh, we also get... Oh, it didn't break.
Closed captions. During Half-Life 2 development, we were approached by folks interested in accessibility who encouraged us to go beyond the subtitle system we had built for Half-Life 1. They requested a full-featured closed captioning system to capture all game sounds, not just dialogue. This turned out to be a much tougher challenge than expected. Half-Life 2 produced a wide variety of sounds, and categorizing them for captions was crucial. Prioritization was also key. Dialogue needed to stand out, and it had to be clear who was speaking. Ambient sounds, like distant combat, were important for setting the mood in some levels, but less so if there was an enemy shooting nearby. Our level designers also often reuse sounds in different contexts, so sound might require captioning in one area, but not in another. Ultimately, every sound in the game ended up with its own caption data, formatted almost like a small version of HTML, giving us control over the visual style of each caption. As with the audio files, the caption data was too large to keep in memory, so we built an asynchronous caching system to handle it efficiently.
Wow. That's kind of a lot. You can tell that's something they didn't think about until later.
It always starts. First the building, then the whole block. They have no reason to come to our place. Don't worry, they'll find one.
Here we have a lot of commentary notes. Okay.
Physics simulation. Even though we began Half-Life 2 with a functional third-party physics simulation, it still took us years of additional work both on the simulation itself and its integration into the game until we felt like we could meet our designers' ambitions. Maintaining a shippable level of quality and performance was something we knew would be a challenge along the way, but the more subtle issue was actually figuring out what to simulate and to what extent. We can't simulate everything, and even if we could, there are game design reasons why the experience is better when we don't. In many cases, we deliberately bend the simulation to improve the player's experience.
Whoa.
These adjustments usually go unnoticed because they align with player intentions. For example, we disable collisions between the player and large objects to let them turn in narrow spaces. Or we tweak the Combine rifle's alternate fire to gently guide the Combine ball toward enemies, making it more effective.
Oh, they did that? That's... Okay, yeah, that checks out, but that is kind of funny that the ball actually does track.
Baby. This small baby doll has a long legacy.
Oh, interesting.
During the long months of internal testing, some of the team turned it into a challenge, a way to make the 47th playthrough of a game a bit more fun. They'd place the doll inside of a nearby blue crate and see how far they could carry it throughout the game. After Half-Life 2 launched, the community started carrying Crate Baby as well, adding their own stories and rules to the mix. A few years later, while working on Episode 2, this was the inspiration for the Little Rocket Man achievement, where players had to carry a garden gnome dubbed Gnome Chomsky throughout the entire episode. Chomsky even made a comeback for Left 4 Dead 2 in the Garden Gnome achievement, where players had to carry him through the Dark Carnival campaign. These kind of interactions with players are some of the most rewarding parts of game development. We design games with theories in mind, but you never really know where things are going until players get their hands on it.
Where's the crate? Oh, right over there. Okay. Well, we're not going to do that because that's a lot of effort, but that is cool.
Physics Simulation 2. Areas where game design or other constraints impacted the physical simulation often required extra tuning to keep the simulation from blowing up. As an example, early on we experimented with decreasing the simulation on the player entity, which is to say, make player movement much more a part of the physical simulation of the world. We knew this might make movement feel less precise, but hoped it could lead to some novel experiences. However, after tuning the movement to match the less simulated version, we had a major problem. The physical force needed for the player to move at their usual speed was so high that simply running into other simulated objects could result in death from the impact. We iterated on it, but ultimately couldn't find a solution we liked, and reverted to the less simulated movement. However, this wasn't exactly the easier path. It introduced new challenges with how the less simulated player interacted with the more simulated objects in the game. But it did allow us to deliver the precise movement experience we wanted.
And it allowed them to make this seesaw and these swings that you can actually pretty much just swing on. Oh, although I'm stuck. Hold on. You can't use the monkey bars though. You're almost as tall as the monkey bars anyway, so I don't know if it would really be.
Playground. When we discussed ways to highlight our physics simulation around the city environment, a playground felt like the natural fit. And for players paying attention to Dr. Breen, it's also a reminder of the cost of humanity's surrender to the Combine. We chose a few playground structures with interesting physics potential and began tuning them. Even with the advanced physics simulation we had at the time, setups like this always required hand tuning, as we had fully simulated objects interacting with non- or partially simulated ones, such as the player or static world geometry. It might be easy to assume that a simulation can carry a lot of the load of implementation, but even now, 20 years later, that is rarely the case. Back when we were working on the playground, late in development on the game, we couldn't get the friction on the slide to feel right, so we decided to break the ladder so the player couldn't get up there.
Oh.
However, you still can just walk right up the front. As is commonly the case, you, the player, get the last laugh on us.
You can. Hold on. I'm gonna do this. Okay. Well, I think I kind of like jumped down. Yeah, it doesn't slide. You just kind of walk down. Yeah, I mean, on hold, this whole area is very impressive. And, you know... yeah. You missed. And it would kind of be like a inspiration for some of the early Splatoon tutorial areas. They kind of work in a similar way, and they're also pretty effective.
Materials and shaders. Half-Life 2 came out in the midst of a significant shift in 3D graphics, where the industry moved from textures to materials and shaders. In Half-Life 1, every surface had a texture, essentially an image wrapped onto the polygons of the surface.
Yeah,
but by Half-Life 2, just 5 years later, every surface had both a material and a shader. The shader was a lump of code that customized how the surface was rendered. The material defined properties for how the surface behaved physically and how it responded to gameplay features. It also held references to textures and other parameters for the shader to use for rendering. As a result, artists and designers had much more control over how things looked and behaved. However, this came with a trade-off.
You need a GPU.
Half-Life 1 could run on a computer with only a CPU, but Half-Life 2 required a GPU because the computations needed for materials and shaders were specifically designed for GPU hardware. The refracting glass door here is a clear example of a custom shader, but every surface in the scene is actually running a shader of some kind.
Yeah, it's weird to think about now, but like... right in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were some games that were coming out not requiring you to have a graphical processing unit at all. You just ran it. With a CPU. Like, that seems crazy now, especially with how video games are, but there were games like that. Okay, I think I'm gonna go down here, actually. I'm gonna go through this cool door into nowhere. But yeah, it's really not surprising that they needed to require a GPU for this game. I mean, the graphics are high enough.
Cube maps. With the addition of materials and shaders, we needed a solution for reflective surfaces like glass and steel. These surfaces had to know what to reflect, but in 2003 we couldn't do any of that rendering in real time. So we developed the cube map system for pre-computed reflections. A cube map is a set of 6 images on the inside of a cube, capturing the environment in every direction.
Yeah.
Like a panoramic photo that surrounds you on all sides. Level designers placed invisible marker entities throughout the levels, and during map compilation we generate a cube map at each marker. Then, during gameplay, when rendering a reflective surface, we locate the nearest pre-computed cube map to create the reflection.
No, Andy, I haven't seen the documentary yet. It's on my, to watch list, so I'll probably watch it in the next day or two, but yes, I am interested in that.
Field
Definitely
of view.
Gonna be watching that.
In Half-Life 1, we used a 90-degree field of view, or FOV, which was fairly standard for first-person shooters at the time. But during Half-Life 2's development, we grew unhappy with it. With our game's focus on characters, we'd put extensive effort into detailed facial and body animations. But the 90-degree FOV just didn't allow players to get close enough to fully appreciate that detail. So we began experimenting with a tighter FOV, and ultimately landed on 75 degrees. It took some adjustment for both us and players, and it required an additional FOV for view models, which are the player's weapon, held at the bottom of the screen. Their models were originally built with 90 degrees in mind, so they looked distorted at 75. But this change succeeded in doing what we wanted, putting our characters front and center in the game.
Interesting. Oh, did they change it temporarily?
Reference maps. As our characters grew more lifelike between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2, we wanted the game...
Oh, yes, yeah, Half-Life's on the Quake engine. Yeah,
in Half-Life 1,
90 is
limitations
Pro,
of first-person games often made it easier to lean on stylized or abstracted environments. But with Half-Life 2, we set out to create a setting that felt grounded in reality, which meant focusing on a lot of small details we hadn't before.
One of our main steps was creating reference maps to standardize how we'd map real-world proportions into the game.
Oh, is this about the TV?
These maps establish details like wall and door dimensions, doorknob heights, interior lighting, furniture scale, and the general scale of common objects. We created standardized textures for level designers, complete with scale and lighting values.
There's X.
The layouts would be consistent from the start. Besides setting up the physical world, these reference maps defined how the player would move through it, how high they could jump, how low they could duck, and
I wonder
the
if
size
that's
of
part of the
spaces like
commentary,
beds.
or if I'm actually
Using
mixing a
these maps
texture
as
there.
foundation, we were able to keep our world geometry consistent and ensure realistically sized spaces across the game.
Also, very cool.
We're really gonna get it.
Yeah, and then he reacts. Very impressive.
Missing material.
Oh, here we go.
Early on in developing our low-level graphics code, we
So
realized
this is
it would be
intentional,
difficult to spot polygons that weren't rendering due to a missing texture. When this happened, you typically just see
I'll
black
throw the
where
TV
the
out the
polygon
window.
should
Hold
be,
on.
which could easily go unnoticed in darker scenes.
Oh,
to
I
catch this bug more reliably, we created an error texture that would be visually unmistakable and generated automatically whenever a texture failed to load. This gave rise to the now iconic purple and black checkerboard texture, which has since taken on a life of its own well beyond Half-Life 2.
Yeah, because it's CSGO and Gmod. Actually, where's... turn on no clip, I thought, but what's the, hold on. Keyboard. Miscellaneous. Yeah, it should be this one. Oh well. Here, I can throw this TV out of... Well, these windows aren't open. Well, I did break the TV. Sounded like... Keyboard advanced. Oh, you gotta enable it. Okay. No clip. There we go. Let's. Oh boy, I've moved too far. Forgot how fast you can move if you're. Okay, let's. No clip off. There we go. Oh boy. Oh boy. Things have loaded interestingly. Yeah, you can really move very quickly with all this stuff. Okay. Which window's open? No clip. One of these windows is open, right? Oh wait, no, none of them are. You can't throw it out the window. Yeah, achievements are already disabled. Oh, it breaks it. Oh, that's pretty impressive. I wonder why only that one. Now the real question here, how is this gonna work? Yeah, he's broken. Okay. No clip. Right through him. No clip. There we go. All right, back to the regularly scheduled program. I just had to quick throw that out the window, you know. Oh, it works over here too. They also didn't talk about this couple, which shows up throughout the games. They show up here first, and they show up again
The
later.
raid. The section ahead, where the Metro Cops raid the apartment while the player's inside, took a lot of iteration to get right. Generally, we design Half-Life to let players set their own pace, since people move through the game in a variety of ways. Some players run, ignoring anything that doesn't seem like a threat, while others methodically poke at everything. So whenever we need to force a specific pace, it's always a challenge to ensure players perceive that pace and naturally play along. Since this is the first time we do this, we had to put in a lot of work to make it clear to the player that they needed to move quickly, and there's no time for exploration here.
The Raid 2. In addition to making sure the player felt the pressure to move forward, we had to ensure the raid itself was foolproof. There couldn't be any way for the player to avoid it or double back past the Metro Cop. The real challenge wasn't that players would try to break the scene, but that many would panic and run in random directions once they realized they were under threat for the first time.
Just kill them.
This moment requires a delicate balance. We wanted a heart-pounding escape, the sense of real danger.
Now, of course, if you have the
but
commentary,
we wanted players
you
to
never
make it
die,
through on their
so.
first try and feel like they escaped by the skin of their teeth. To achieve this, we kept the path ahead clear and reminiscent to the one they had just taken through the previous floor. A series of carefully placed triggers controls the threats appearing ahead and behind, maintaining the pressure while still giving players enough time to stay ahead of their pursuers.
Ouch. Oh, this is gonna kill me because, yeah, the commentary node gives you invulnerability.
In addition to making sure
okay, we've already listened to that one. Okay.
There's no time to lose.
Yes, because they kill this guy in one shot. He just kind of dies. It's very weird. Also, there's a lot more people here than in any of the other areas, which is interesting. Ouch. Now you take like big hits if you get hit by him.
Quick, keep moving. Head for the roof.
Yep, and then he blocks the door, which make it to a more traditional roof.
Health and no HUD. The rooftop chase sequence posed a unique design challenge. We didn't want it to be a true gameplay obstacle, and our best case was for players to make it through on their first try. But we still wanted to create the sense of real danger, where players felt legitimately threatened if they didn't keep moving. The challenge was that without the HEV suit, players don't technically have a heads-up display or HUD, which means no way to show damage over remaining health. After some experimenting, we created a special health system for this section, using a red glow around the screen to indicate damage.
Oh, okay.
Players reacted as we hoped, taking it as a sign to keep moving, and the chase unfolded as intended. To top it off, we made health regenerate quickly so the glow wouldn't linger, reinforcing to players that running was indeed the right choice, and ensuring players weren't taken down by a stray bullet at the end just because they dawdled or hesitated earlier on.
And then I think they reused that for like, yeah, here, you can see. They reused that for Portal a little bit, where like, if you're getting shot at by if you pull up the Half-Life HUD for Portal, the first one, and you then get shot by the drones, you can see that like, you take a decent amount of damage quickly, but then after that, you reload, like your health comes back really quickly as well. So it's kind of like it's a puzzle mechanic. It's not literally a challenge. It's not a shooter challenge. So this is kind of the same.
In the upcoming section, we needed the player to be knocked down so Alex could save them. With limited time and resources, we simplified the encounter as much as possible, reusing existing systems and letting it play out like a normal combat sequence, with a custom event triggered when the player died. After a few playtests to fine-tune the timing, we moved on. But as we got close to shipping, we encountered a problem with a playtester who quick-saved constantly and immediately hit quick-load whenever they thought they'd failed. When a Metro caught with them, they quick-loaded before Alex could step in, repeating this more than 10 times before we asked them to stop. At this stage of development, in the final bug-fixing phase, we had to limit ourselves to fixing only game-breaking issues, since even small changes could risk breaking something more important. Knowing this was a rare edge case, because most players had no trouble, we made a few conservative changes. We shortened the delay between the knockdown and Alex's first line, and changed the fade-out color to white instead of black.
Yeah,
which wasn't
that's a big help.
ultimately that useful, since players hadn't died enough yet to associate black with death.
Oh,
we considered
I guess.
disabling quick load for the few seconds that the scene plays out, but we were worried that could introduce a bug where quick load became disabled permanently.
Yeah, and that would be bad. So you still get, and this also breaks, so you can't run back up. which is a very clever way of doing it. Oh, yeah. It does come, like, it does go really fast to make sure you don't accidentally, like, miss it.
Dr. Freeman, I presume.
And we get the
We better hurry.
probably most interesting character
The Combine can be slow to
in
wake, but once
the
they're
game.
up, you don't want to get in their way.
In the sense that, like...
Alex.
Yeah, here.
Nailing Alex's design was a big challenge. We wanted the player to both respect and care for her. Saving Eli was a key player goal midway through the game, and we knew that getting players to care about that goal would be easier if they also cared about Alex and her relationship with her father. We intentionally designed, wrote dialogue, and cast a voice actor for Alex to be savvy, capable, and relatable within the Combine-controlled world, while also making her attractive and charismatic. We aim to avoid the objectification, exaggeration, and
which means
hypersexuality
that
many games
she
of the 2000s
still works as a
featured,
character.
as we felt that would undermine our goals for her character.
I'm Alex Vance.
She's,
I worked with you back in Black Mesa. I'm sure you don't remember
not
me, though.
bad, but
Man, a few words.
I
aren't
don't
you?
think, there's not, like, she doesn't inspire the same
Remember him
amount
from
of,
Black Mesa? Your old
what's the
administrator.
word,
Don't get my dad started on Dr. Breen.
appreciate, like...
Through here.
NPCs on elevators. We often spend a significant amount of time solving problems that players might not even notice. Many of these are subtle design challenges, while others stem from multiple systems interacting with each other. For example, getting non-player characters to ride in elevators posed a complex problem because it involved various systems, NPC AI decision-making, navigation planning, and movement simulation, to name a few. Additionally, the elevator itself had its own simulation requirements unrelated to NPCs. One of the more subtle challenges came from the fact that we simulate NPCs at a slower rate than we simulate elevators. This meant that NPCs on a descending elevator would simulate to make sure they were properly standing on the elevator, and then the elevator would simulate a few times, each time moving further down the elevator shaft, subtly leaving the NPC behind. Shortly after that, the NPC would simulate a second time and pop itself down on the elevator floor once again. You can imagine that it was hard to take Alex seriously when she was constantly falling down in small increments while talking to you.
Good.
Interactive storytelling. When we started on Half-Life 2, storytelling in games was generally either high fidelity and linear or low fidelity and interactive. We knew players had seen high-quality storytelling in games, but they'd never been placed right in the middle of it, able to watch it unfold around them, interact with it, and examine any part closely. While that goal excited us, we didn't yet know how it would work or what kind of technology we'd need to make it happen. We had built a variety of storytelling technology in Half-Life 1, but it was mostly presented in front of the player and lacked the interactivity and fidelity we were aiming for. So Kleiner's lab became the section of the game we used as a testbed to figure out how our interactive storytelling would actually function.
Alex is kind of a... she doesn't inspire passion in the way that some other characters, even in this series, do.
Funny, you showing up on this day in
Oh,
particular.
this is the end of the first chapter, which I'm at in an hour, so I think we'll go through some of the ones that are like right here and then move on. But she's
We've been helping people escape the city
like
on
not
foot.
bad. Nobody really.
dangerous route
I'm
to
sure
my
there's some
father's
people who
lab,
don't really like
the
her,
Hill
but nobody
Canals.
really hates her. But
Today we're finally
you
on
know,
the
she
road
doesn't
to having a
inspire
better
like
way.
certain passion about that people have with other characters, like some of the scientists or Gordon Freeman, right? Like she's kind of
Kleiner's lab.
more in the middle.
Kleiner's lab was the first piece of storytelling we worked on, and the one that took the longest to figure out. In addition to its role in launching the player into the game, it eventually became the unifying vision for the development team in terms of storytelling. As we began building our characters and narrative delivery around the player, many questions arose, all of which felt like major risks for the game.
Okay, we're gonna try to get through
Players
these
be able to
commentary notes
extract
and then
the
probably
important
finish.
information from the scene. Could we get them to care about these characters? How would we support players with varying levels of investment in the story? How costly would it be to produce a scene like this? And how many more would we need? These and many more were questions we couldn't answer until we built enough of the scene and tested it with a lot of playtesters. Frustratingly, unlike many other problems we face, these weren't questions we could confidently answer until we had done significant work. We can often test gameplay ideas with low-fidelity prototypes, but if a player isn't invested in our storytelling when the characters are just gray blocks, how confident can we be that they'll care once the characters are fully realized?
Choreography.
Oh,
the system we built and iterated on to deliver Half-Life 2's storytelling was internally called Choreo, short for choreography. Early on, we found it useful to imagine we were writing a play where one of the actors didn't know the script. We needed a system that could control all the other actors, moving them around the stage, delivering their performances and speaking their lines. To handle this, the other actors would need to seamlessly mix our directorial commands with dynamic responses to the player's position and behavior. Timing was clearly going to be a major challenge, as any part of the scene might need to lengthen, contract, or even pause, depending on what the player was doing.
And for an example here, I stopped to listen to that commentary node, and now she's just kind of sitting there looking around.
Face Poser. The primary tool we built to power the Choreo system was called Face Poser, an inaccurately named program that allowed our animators to lay out the entire structure of our scenes along a timeline.
It's not about faces at all.
The timeline contained a series of choreo commands for the actors, along with all the necessary information for them to perform those commands. By layering these commands on the timeline, animators could easily describe how an actor might need to face one thing while talking towards another and walk to a different location, all at the same time. But the timeline wasn't a fixed linear sequence. Actors would follow their commands, but they had to respond dynamically to the world around them. An actor might take longer to move to a location if the player is in the way, or they might need to wait to deliver a line because another actor has been delayed by the player. Face Poser allowed us to rapidly iterate on scenes, trying different layouts, dialogue deliveries, and timings. This ability to quickly experiment and adjust proved critical in finding the right performances to achieve our character and narrative goals.
It is pretty impressive, and I'm assuming most AAA games with lots of characters and NPCs like this moved towards that system.
Choreo commands.
Oh, here we go.
This debug visualization shows the two most common choreo commands actors receive throughout a scene, internally known as look-ats and move-tos. Actors are given targets to look at, sometimes more than one at a time, and then try to focus on the one that makes the most sense given their current state. At the same time, they might be receiving move-to commands, which tell them to move to a location and face a specific direction or object. Even these seemingly simple commands involved a lot of complexity. A scene might require an actor to talk while typing on a keyboard, all while looking at an object the player is holding. Since we couldn't predict where the player would be during playback, authoring scenes like this required us to break each element of the scene into separate pieces and layers. These could then be reassembled as needed during playback, based on the player's actions and interrupted if necessary.
Lab interactivity. In our choreo scenes, we have the player trapped for a bit, allowing us to focus on the characters and narrative. To accommodate different players, some deeply invested in the story, others unable to stand still for more than a second, we felt like we needed a constant stream of interesting details on screen. We scattered narrative elements throughout the environment, ensuring some were interactive, essentially toys for the player to tinker with.
Yeah. See.
In some cases, we embedded further storytelling into these, like the cactus mini teleporter hinting at the upcoming teleporter failure. It was a delicate balance. Too much visual interest could distract players from the core of the scene. Ultimately, Kleiner's lab played it safe with interactivity, as it was the first major choreo scene. Later, in Eli's lab, we explored it more deeply, ensuring the characters themselves paid attention to what the players were tinkering with.
Delivery. It took a lot of iteration and playtesting to strike the right balance of information and emotional connection in our major choreo scenes. Each scene had a lot of information we needed to convey to the player, but we couldn't just have characters spouting exposition.
I might just look at these on my own.
Of them more as signposts than as people. We needed to take the time
However,
to let the
this
characters
effect is
interact
really
with each
impressive.
other, allowing the player to observe the relationships. At the same time, we had to expand upon the world,
cool.
giving the player a sense of everything that had happened while they were gone. All this had to be done carefully, without taking too long. We wanted the game to work for players who were less invested in the narrative. Animation became a powerful tool in communicating the emotional connections between characters, often conveying the depth of a moment quickly without overstating it. Humor was another commonly used tool, helping to puncture a setup and disarm the player when things got a bit too heavy.
Yeah, there's a good chunk of humor in the game to make up for the fact that they're like it is super dystopian world building.
In the Half-Life 1 era, player goals in FPS games were still largely about fighting and defeating an obviously evil enemy. It was hard to get players to care about characters when they were as low fidelity as they were in Half-Life 1. With the planned improvements in character fidelity for Half-Life 2, we wanted to take a shot at making characters the driving force of the narrative. Our goal was for the player's motivations to align with those of our characters, for the player to care about their hopes and fears, and to want them to succeed.
Yeah, look, it's him.
With this in mind, we were able to assemble our approach to character and dialogue. We would create a set of characters who liked and cared about each other, hoping that the player would feel the same. These characters would interact in a way that felt inclusive, like a group of old friends who see the player as one of them, just someone who's been away for a while. If the characters demonstrated realistic emotional connections with each other, we believed we could build an emotional connection with the player as well.
And that works pretty well, I would say, in terms of the story. It does kind of make this weird problem where they're all okay with you, even though you've been missing for 20 years or whatever, like 15, 20 years.
To create more responsive and multidimensional characters in Half-Life 2, we needed to evolve our approach to working with voice actors. While running through a script with a modicum of direction was sufficient for much of the NPC dialogue for Half-Life 1, for Half-Life 2 we decided to give the actors more of an opportunity to be involved in helping to define the characters and bring them to life. We provided much more story context to the actors, showing them the game world, the environments their characters inhabited, and the other characters they interacted with. We sought actors who could take all that information and synthesize it into their performances to elevate their characters beyond what we had imagined. We held multiple sessions with the main actors, allowing them to digest and build upon their characters over time. For scenes where characters are interacting with each other, we'd often cue an actor with performances from other actors in the scene to create a better sense of connection and flow. Though we'd arrive at the studio with a script and a plan for the recording session, we made sure that the actors felt empowered and had the space to bring their own ideas to the character and performances. Having animators attend the voiceover sessions also proved critical, as they were responsible for stitching the characters' dialogue together with physical actions and expressions to form the resulting choreo scene. Often, animators found that their plans for how a scene would play out evolved quite a bit after working with the voice actor. Archetypes. We wanted to create narrative links between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2 through our characters. Our idea was to design individuals who felt like representations of Half-Life 1's archetypes, so that players might find them familiar, almost as though they'd met them in Half-Life 1 at some point that they couldn't quite remember.
Yeah, well...
We based Dr. Kleiner on the scientist model we felt was the most iconic, and his personality was largely shaped by Hal Robbins, whose voice and performances had defined the Half-Life 1 scientists. One day, when we were in the thick of trying to figure out this character, Dr. Kleiner's face came into focus, as we happened to share an elevator with an accountant from an office on another floor of our building. And looking at him, it was clear that this is Dr. Kleiner's face. Luckily, he was receptive when we asked if we could photograph him for a video game character.
You know, they kind of do it well with what they wanted to do, right? They wanted the player to connect with these characters, even though they're basically new. So that means they had to connect them to the Half-Life 1 characters. The only problem is for people who are, like, super invested in the lore, it becomes this sort of like, well, they weren't really in Half-Life 1, but they were. But they weren't. But they
Figuring
were.
out what characters should react to and how was an ongoing challenge. At the core, we always want the game to respond to player input. However, any response from the game can be seen as a reward by the player. So, what characters react to, and what they ignore, teaches the player about the kind of input the game expects. As a result, we made sure to respond to things we wanted more of, like players tinkering with devices in the lab. And ignored behaviors we wanted less of, like players repeatedly slapping Kleiner in the face with a box over and over again. Seriously, we watched the playtester do it for 5 minutes straight.
And it's our animation. Constructing believable human motion for our characters out of many discrete layers of animation required a lot of technological iteration. Even simple actions like turning to look at something or walking to a location became more complex when combined with the need to dynamically respond to the player and the requirements of choreo commands. For example, turning to look at something had to be fully composed, allowing a character to use any combination of its eyes, head, shoulders,
that's pretty
upper torso, or full body to face a target. In Half-Life 1, human characters had their bodies separated into upper and lower halves, allowing them to walk in one direction while facing another. However, this approach was too abstract for Half-Life 2's characters. Instead, our animators created walking animations in all 8 directions of the compass, which could then be smoothly blended together at runtime.
Oh, Kleiner's actually gone. He, despawns, I guess.
Setting the right tone for our characters and their dialogue was critical. We aimed for a respectful, almost pleasant style of interaction with the player, while avoiding anything that felt too subservient. This balance was especially tricky with Alex, who needed to support the player without compromising the strength of her character, something we felt was crucial for players to respect her. Her relationship with Eli was a core driver of the player's motivations, so it was important that players liked her and wanted to help her. We also wanted to contrast the warmth and camaraderie between the player's allies against the hostilities of Breen and the Combine, inspiring a sense of righteous indignation in the players for the battles ahead.
Well, that one, you get the righteous indignation with the world building. I'll clip back off. And when it comes to the players,
It's right there, Gordon.
oh, they're telling me to do something. We gotta fix the thing. When it comes to the characters, if you don't really care about them, then you won't really care about them. There's nothing they really can do.
Interactivity.
In that way.
At certain points in our choreo scenes, we require the player to take action. Beyond simply giving them something to do and keeping them engaged, these moments served a few key purposes. First, they allow the player to catch up, even if they've been distracted by something else in the environment. The scene could safely pause until the player completed the task, ensuring they were back and paying attention. At the same time, it let us position the player where we needed them, which was useful for framing the scene and making sure they saw something important. In some cases, we got double value out of these moments by using them to train the player. Here, they're learning to interact with plugs and sockets, a skill they'll need for puzzles later in the game.
Monitors. We use monitors a lot for storytelling in Half-Life 2 in the episodes, so much so that we make fun of ourselves for it. The problem is they're just too damn useful. They're fantastic for expanding the world by showing events happening elsewhere, and they provide an easy way to have characters
That comes from
without
Blue
needing to
Shift.
explain how they all got to the player's location. Anyone who's ever written any kind of story, especially one with an ensemble cast, understands the unique frustration of trying to create natural reasons for all of your characters to come together in the same place. In this case, we were really happy with how the monitor allowed Alex to teleport away and then quickly appear in Eli's lab, making everything feel
pretty
real and
useful from a narrative
Alex's
standpoint.
kiss. It's a small moment, but Alex's kiss on Eli's
we're
cheek
gonna
was
see that
important. Eventually, we're going to ask the player to save Eli, and we want them to care about him. To build that emotional connection, we needed to show the warmth and affection between Alex and Eli. We didn't want to oversell it with dialogue or make it too big of an event. It had to feel genuine, not performative. And we were able to iterate on the subtleties of this moment until it struck just the right note.
Okay, let's continue the game. There we go.
You gonna let Gordon throw the switch?
Yeah! I get to throw the switch.
Go right ahead.
There we go. There's the switch.
Very good. Final sequence. Commencing now.
I can't look.
This is it's probably one of the weird ones here because we missed it, but they just talked about how it might have just killed.
Did it work?
See for yourself.
Hey, Doc. Thank goodness. My relief is almost palpable.
Fantastic work, Izzy.
Well, I can't take all the credit. Dr. Freeman.
Yeah,
proved an
clicked
able
buttons just like the first game.
assistant. Right you are. Speak to you again in a few moments.
Okay, I don't know if we'll have any more.
That switch and all. I can
yeah,
see your MIT education
even
really
makes
pays
fun of
for
you
itself.
for it.
All right, Barney. Your turn.
Gee, thanks.
Gordon, as soon as you're in position, we'll send you to E-Rides.
All right.
And not a moment too soon.
We'll go through this and then I think we'll end it because this is the transition into like the rest of the game.
Initializing in 3, 2, 1. Barney, if you'll be so kind.
Good luck out there, Gordon.
Yes, indeed. We're ready to project you, Gordon. Bon voyage, and best of luck in your future.
This is a very interesting narrative choice.
What is it? It's your freaking headhopper.
Look, we also get introduced to some of the other characters that are going on.
What's the meaning of this?
Hey, it's me.
How did you get in here?
Well,
There he is. Oh, we're losing it again. The more I saw, I'm all but certain it was Gordon Freeman.
it's me. Oh no. Oh, this is the scary, like one of the scariest parts of the game, right there. Right behind. And here we are in the actual game. And we have a sprint button. Gotta take more pictures and everything. I'm surprised there's no commentary nodes right here, actually. Like one, maybe. Talking about that sequence they just did. Okay. I think I'm going to call it for the stream. I got to do stuff. Yeah, here's some more commentary notes. But that was basically the opening to the game, which is probably the most interesting section from a commentary perspective. There's lots of different things to talk about there. So, yeah. This was a good stream. Next week, I'll put Half-Life 1 up on it. I probably won't do the commentary ones because they're not new. And, I mean, they're interesting, but yeah, you know. Maybe I will do the commentary, but maybe not.
Hey, Gordon.
Oh, where is? Oh yeah, actually, hold on.
Phonium extraction. Another critical tool we built into FacePoser was the phonium editor. It processed the voice actors' dialogue lines and extracted phoniums to generate basic
It's very
lip-sync
impressive.
animations for our characters. For the hero characters, our animators use this as a starting point to create high-quality custom animations for each dialogue line, incorporating full facial animation. However, in a dynamic choreo scene, the animators wouldn't know exactly what the rest of the actor's body would be doing. This meant it required careful layering of choreo commands and timings in FacePoser, while still maintaining the actor's ability to dynamically respond to the player.
Okay. But now we have the thing, so now we are the best, and we can see that it puts little bullet holes everywhere, because that's how it works, hit scan. But that is going to be the end of the stream. I'm going to save and come back to this for sure, because, yeah, it's tons of new commentary to listen to, and I've listened to all the other ones, so I might as well listen to this one. Anyway,